What is the best way to handle serious disagreements within the church? There is no one correct answer to this question. Rather, it depends on the kind of church community you're talking about. In our circles, we tend to be pretty tolerant of differences. But in other types of Christian communities, there can be much less tolerance. Continuing with themes begun in the letter 1 John, 2 John confronts head-on the issue of how to treat people whose opinions are not orthodox. And to our ears, it's pretty severe. Hello, I'm Stuart Baskin, pastor of First Presbyterian Church of Tyler, Texas. And this is your daily devotional for Friday, May 24th, 2024. 2 John is a bit enigmatic. It is addressed to the elect lady and her children. Scholars have debated the identity of this figure for centuries. While there is no final consensus, my money is on the elect lady being a particular church and her children its members. Interestingly, the writer says, I was overjoyed to find some of your children walking in the truth. Some of your children walking in the truth. Clearly, not everyone in the church agreed on everything, and some members apparently held beliefs outside the accepted bounds of right doctrine. And yet, they are still referred to as children, just like the rest of the church. The writer then reiterates what we saw throughout 1 John, namely, that believers must love one another. But now, dear lady, John writes, I ask you, not as though I were writing you a new commandment, but one we have had from the beginning, let us love one another. And as in 1 John, he qualifies what love means. And this is love, he writes, that we walk according to the Father's commandments. But now a shoe drops, one you could see coming from a mile away. The issue is teachers of false doctrine. We see Paul in his letters struggling with the same issue, but Paul's complaints revolve around the issue of Gentile Christians being challenged to obey Jewish law, a practice Paul roundly rejects. For John, the issue is different. He writes, Many deceivers have gone out into the world, those who do not confess that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh. Any such person is the deceiver and the Antichrist. Be on your guard so that you do not lose what we have worked for, but may receive a full reward. Everyone who does not abide in the teaching of Christ, but goes beyond it, does not have God. Whoever abides in the teaching has both the Father and the Son. For John, the issue is, if anything, more central to the gospel than Paul's challenges. For John, the issue is teachers, perhaps itinerant preachers who traveled around the church preaching wherever they could, and who taught a gospel without the incarnation. At the time, there were folks who denied the incarnation in the church. In particular, there were people in the church we called docetists, who taught that the earthly manifestation of Jesus was not actually a bodily reality, but something more like a visible spiritual form. The word docetist comes from the Greek word dokein, meaning to seem. In their teaching, that Jesus who appeared on earth only seemed to take human form, but was actually a disembodied spirit. We can even see in the Gospel of John, almost certainly written by a close associate of the writer of the Johannine letters, if not the same person, this same concern in the opening verses of that Gospel. Verse 14 says, And the Word became flesh and lived among us, and we have seen his glory, the glory as of a Father's only Son, full of grace and truth. For the Johannine community, the incarnation of God in Jesus Christ was the truth from which all other truths flow. So that's what the writer was up against. How then should the church respond to someone whose understanding of the incarnation differs? He writes, Do not receive into the house or welcome anyone who comes to you and does not bring this teaching, that is, the incarnation. For to welcome is to participate in the evil deeds of such a person. Wow. For those of us nurtured on a broad-minded, inclusive church, This can strike us as exceedingly narrow-minded. But remember, the Johannine community was one community among others in the church, and different Christian communities might have taken a different approach. H. Richard Niebuhr, in his book Christ and Culture, says of this Christ against culture type that while it has some deficiencies, it expresses an important impulse within the church, the impulse to draw definite boundaries to distinguish the church from the world. As we'll see tomorrow, Niebuhr's problem with this type of Christianity is that, taken to its extreme, it is not sustainable on its own. Still, it does highlight the importance of being clear about who we are and what we believe. Tomorrow, we'll wrap up our tour of the Johannine letters when we walk through 3 John. But for now, may God continue to bless you and keep you in all that you do this day and in all the days ahead.